Welcome to Unveiled Confessions, where the most raw and shocking confessions are revealed. I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. You won't want to miss what's coming next. I should have known something was off when he seemed way too excited about my shoes. Like, I've had guys mention them before, but usually it's just a quick, "oh cool sneakers," and then we move on. With him though, it was like the main topic from the moment we matched. Every photo I had on Hinge where my shoes showed, he commented. Converse, platform boots, even the dumb strawberry Crocs I wear as a joke sometimes, he was obsessed. At first, I thought it was kind of sweet. Finally, someone who didn't just ask the usual "wid" or "you up" kind of stuff. He actually seemed interested in the random things that make me, me. So when he asked me out, I said yes. We met up at this weird fusion place, one of those spots that serves tacos and sushi on the same menu, the kind of place that's trying way too hard to be different, but whatever, it had good lighting and the tables were small and cozy. He was already sitting when I arrived, and he stood up all smiley, looking exactly like his pictures. I remember thinking, wow, I might actually have gotten lucky with this one. The night itself was fine on the surface. He made dumb jokes, asked me about my family, all that typical date stuff. But here's what stood out. Every few minutes, I'd notice his phone angled strangely. Not directly on the table, not in his lap, but tilted just enough that it pointed downward. I didn't think too hard about it at first. Just figured he was one of those people who can't sit still without messing with their phone. But then, there was this one moment that stuck. I dropped my napkin, leaned down to grab it, and his phone was right there. The camera app was open, and the angle? Pointing directly under the table. At my feet. I froze for a second. My brain tried to make excuses. Maybe he'd been taking a picture of his food earlier and just forgot to close the app. Maybe it wasn't even recording. I didn't want to ruin the vibe by confronting him, so I just forced myself to laugh it off in my head. But from then on, I couldn't stop noticing how often his phone was aimed downward. By the time the bill came, I was just relieved it was over. I told myself I wouldn't see him again, but he texted later that night saying how much fun he had, and some twisted part of me thought, maybe I'm overthinking. So I kept chatting with him for a couple weeks. Then everything flipped. One night, I was scrolling through Twitter and stumbled on this random meme account. Totally normal, nothing to do with dating. But one of the replies under a post was from an account I'd never seen before, with a profile picture of some girl's legs. The comment said, "She has no idea." Something about it pulled me in. I clicked the account, and there they were, my feet. Every single picture was mine. Crocs, boots, Converse, even the socks I wore that night at the sushi taco place. Hundreds of photos, all cropped so you couldn't see my face. He had them labeled with captions like, "She doesn't know I got these tonight," and "Fresh catch." And the worst part? There was a link. I didn't even want to click, but of course I did. It opened to some OnlyFans-style page, except it wasn't random pictures of strangers. It was me, my feet, my shoes, my ankles. Stuff he had been snapping without me ever realizing. There were videos too. Little shaky clips clearly taken under the table, me moving my foot around, completely unaware. Each one had gross captions underneath, like he was proud of hiding it from me. And people were actually paying for it. Hundreds of subscribers. Comments begging for more of the red Converse girl. I sat there in bed, staring at my own feet in the glow of my laptop, and it felt like my stomach had dropped into a hole. He had turned something so normal, something I never even thought twice about, into content for strangers to drool over. And the way he wrote, "She has no idea," over and over again. Like that was the whole point, that I was clueless. I couldn't sleep for days. I started replaying every moment I'd spent with him, every time he leaned close, every time his phone tilted. I felt disgusting in my own skin, like nothing I wore was safe. Even when I put on slippers in my own house, I kept checking the windows, half convinced someone was snapping photos through the glass. The creepiest part? He messaged me again like nothing was wrong. "When can I see you?" with a stupid smiley face. Meanwhile, I'd just seen a video he uploaded of me walking into that same restaurant, my shoes zoomed in from behind. He must have filmed me the second I walked in. I blocked him on everything, but it didn't matter. The account kept posting. He must have had stockpiled photos from before, because weeks later new ones showed up, same captions, same gross jokes, same reminders that I had no idea. I never told anyone. Not my friends, not my family. I couldn't stand the thought of them finding out, scrolling through some gross site and recognizing my shoes. I just quietly deleted every Hinge photo that showed my feet and started wearing plain sneakers everywhere, like I was trying to erase that part of me. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I still check. I type in that account name, half hoping it's gone, half terrified it's still there, and it always is. The same photos, the same captions, strangers commenting with fire emojis, begging for more. I never see him in person anymore, but sometimes I swear I catch people on the street looking down at my shoes longer than normal, like they recognize them, like they already know me from somewhere I never agreed to be. And that thought that I've been turned into someone else's secret without ever saying yes sticks with me way more than any bad date ever could. I didn't think much of it when she suggested we go back to her place after a couple drinks. It was one of those nights where everything seemed to line up right. We matched on Hinge. She looked like her pictures. The conversation wasn't awkward, and I was already telling myself this was probably the most normal date I'd had in a while. She mentioned she lived in a big flat with a few roommates, and I brushed it off like, yeah, cool, half the people in this city live like that. Her building wasn't anything fancy. Kind of rundown, actually, the type with buzzers that barely work and stairwells that smell like damp laundry. But her apartment door was painted bright yellow, and she laughed about how she and her roommates did it as a joke. It had that messy but lived-in vibe, random jackets on chairs, empty bottles lined up on a shelf, fairy lights with half the bulbs burnt out. At first, it felt fine. She poured me a drink and put some music on low, that kind of lo-fi playlist you'd expect. She was laid back, funny, making dumb jokes, and I was thinking, yeah, this feels pretty chill. She said she was going to grab something from the kitchen and disappeared down the hall. That's when the first roommate walked in. He was tall, looked older than her, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. He just casually strolled in, sat down across from me like we were already friends, and started talking. It threw me off, but I figured, hey, maybe that's just how people are here. Friendly roommates, wanting to make small talk with whoever their flatmate drags home. He asked me the usual stuff, what I do, how long I've lived in the city. I answered, waiting for her to come back, thinking she'd laugh and say, oh, ignore him, he's nosy. Except she didn't. She was gone longer than made sense for someone just grabbing something. Eventually, she came back holding a snack plate like nothing happened, smiling at me like she didn't notice the awkwardness. The guy got up without saying much and left down the hall. She sat right next to me, picked at the food, and kept the vibe going. I let it slide, told myself maybe that's just the dynamic here. Then it happened again. She said she had to use the bathroom and slipped out. A couple minutes later, another guy walked in. Different build, different clothes, but the same casual confidence, like he belonged there. He leaned against the counter, asked me if I liked the place, if I thought she was cool. He laughed like we'd been hanging out for years. At this point, my stomach tightened a little. It was too weird to just be coincidence. Two random guys deciding to talk to me while she just happened to step away. Still, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe she had a lot of protective friends. Maybe this was some test they did. But then the third one came. She left again this time to grab her charger. A new guy walked in, stocky, buzz cut, wearing ripped jeans. He sat down even closer than the others, asking about my phone, where I was from, if I liked the neighborhood. I noticed his eyes flicking to my jacket draped over the chair, to my pocket where my wallet bulged slightly. That's when the pattern finally clicked. Every time she left, a new guy came in. None of them acted surprised to see me. None of them looked at her when she walked back in. It was like a silent rotation they'd done before. I started scanning the room in a panic. I was trying to hide. My wallet was gone from the table. My phone, which I'd set down earlier, wasn't where I thought it was. I didn't want to freak out, so I kept pretending everything was normal, nodding along while she sat back down and talked about some stupid show she was watching. But my head was racing. I replayed every second the first guy distracting me with questions, the second guy standing by my chair, the third guy's eyes darting around. They weren't roommates at all. Or maybe they were, but not in the way she described. She left one more time, saying she was grabbing a blanket. I used that second to check under the table. My phone was sitting there, shoved halfway under a chair like someone had dropped it too fast. My wallet was on the floor by the couch, open, cash folded the wrong way. I didn't wait for the fourth guy. I grabbed my stuff, muttered something about needing fresh air, and headed for the door. My hands were shaking, but I kept it cool, like I wasn't sprinting inside my head. As soon as I stepped into the hall, I picked up speed, past the yellow door, down the sketchy stairwell. I half expected one of them to follow me, but the building stayed silent behind me. When I got back to my place, I counted everything. Cash was lighter than before. My debit card had been slid halfway out of its slot. Notifications showed up on my phone for failed login attempts to random apps. They'd been casing me, going through my stuff while keeping me distracted with fake roommates. I unmatched her instantly, but curiosity made me check later. Her profile was gone, like she'd deleted it or gotten banned. No trace, no name, nothing to prove she ever existed except my missing money and the knot in my chest. Now, every time someone asks to bring me back to their place after a date, I hesitate. I keep replaying those guys' faces, the way they came in one after the other, like a conveyor belt. All of them calm, all of them smiling, all of them acting like this was routine. And the scariest thought isn't that I lost a little cash. It's how easy it was for them to do it. How many other people have sat on that same couch, laughing at her dumb jokes while their stuff slowly disappeared in the background? I never stayed long enough to find out what would have happened if I hadn't noticed. You ever wake up in someone else's bed and immediately regret every single choice that led you there? That was me. The room smelled like stale cologne and laundry detergent, the kind of mix that clings to your skin like smoke. The sheets were tangled around my legs, sticky with the warmth of bodies and bad decisions. His snoring was so loud it made the blinds rattle, and every breath that left his chest grated against my already thin nerves. All I wanted was to sneak to the bathroom, splash some cold water on my face, and figure out how fast I could leave without making it awkward. The floor was covered in clothes, not dirty, just scattered in lazy heaps like he'd peeled them off wherever he stood and never bothered again. A graveyard of t-shirts and jeans. I slid out from under the covers, bare feet brushing against the soft pile of fabric. Shoes were everywhere too, different brands, all half untied. I tiptoed around them like a burglar in a museum, trying not to wake him. The doorknob was cool under my hand when I cracked it open. The hallway was dark, only a sliver of light spilling in from what looked like the living room. The carpet muted my steps, but my heartbeat felt so loud it might as well have echoed. And then it happened. I turned the corner and almost walked straight into a man. Not him. Someone older. He froze. I froze. The mug in his hand trembled, steam curling into the shadows. He looked mid-40s maybe, gray streaks at his temples, crow's feet etched into his skin. His t-shirt was rumpled, like he'd just rolled out of bed, but the way he held himself was different. Authority, age. For a second, it was just awkward. An oops, sorry, I didn't know you had a roommate kind of moment. But then recognition hit me like ice water down my spine. I knew his face. Not in the casual way you think you've maybe seen someone around town. No, I knew him, because months ago I had matched with him on Hinge. My throat went dry. 2 dates. That's all we'd had. But we hooked up once at his place across town. A tidy little apartment with leather couches and a record player that he'd bragged about. The vibe had been off the next morning. Stiff. Like he'd already decided he wasn't interested. He never called again. I never cared enough to follow up. But I remembered him. His face, his laugh, his awkward way of making coffee while avoiding eye contact. And now here he was, standing in the hallway, in the house where I had just woken up after spending the night with his son. My stomach flipped. The world tilted. It was like reality had glitched and dropped me into the wrong save file. The resemblance was suddenly obvious. The sharp jawline, the slope of the nose, the smirk both of them wore like it was genetic. But the son had youth, fresh clothes, a kind of polished confidence his dad never carried. I hadn't connected the dots last night. I hadn't even thought to. Now the pieces were slamming into place, and I felt like I might throw up. Neither of them knew. That was the worst part. The dad didn't know his son had brought me home. The son didn't know I'd already been with his dad. I was the only one standing there, fully aware, my stomach knotting tighter with every second of silence. I couldn't even look him in the eyes properly. I mumbled something about the bathroom, my voice too high, too fast, and brushed past him. The air between us was thick, suffocating, charged. He didn't say a word, just watched me. Not in a leering way, but like he was calculating, processing, like his brain was racing alongside mine, drawing the same horrible lines. The bathroom mirror was harsh under the fluorescent light. My reflection looked pale, hair a messy halo, mascara smudged under my eyes. I gripped the sink until my knuckles turned white. Flashes of memory kept colliding in my head. That first night at the dad's apartment. The way he'd kissed me, hesitant but practiced. The way I'd left the next morning without looking back. And now last night laughing with his son at a bar, feeling that lazy pull of attraction, not knowing where it would lead, not realizing I was sleepwalking into something that would twist me up in shame and disbelief. I tried to breathe, but every inhale felt shallow. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I splashed cold water on my face until droplets slid down my neck. If I had noticed the family photos on the wall earlier, maybe I would have pieced it together before it got this far. But last night I hadn't cared to look. I was distracted by the son's cologne, his easy smile, the way his hand found mine under the bar table. If I'd paid more attention, I might have spared myself this collapse. When I finally opened the door again, the hallway was empty. The mug was gone. The dad was gone. Down the hall, I heard the shower running the son. The sound of rushing water muffled everything else. I darted back into the bedroom, grabbed my clothes in a messy armful, shoved my feet into my shoes without tying them, and bolted for the front door. The air outside hit me like a slap, cold and sharp and real. Standing there on the porch, the quiet street stretching in front of me, I felt dirty in a way I can't explain. It wasn't just that I'd slept with two people from the same family. It was that it had happened without me realizing until it was too late. It felt like some sick trick of fate, like the universe had set a trap and I'd walked right into it. As I walked home, the image of his face wouldn't leave me. The frozen stare, the recognition in his eyes. He remembered me too. I was sure of it. He was replaying the same reel in his head that night months ago. And now this morning. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than words. I never heard from either of them again. The son never texted, which was fine. I would have ignored him anyway. The dad's profile disappeared from Hinge not long after, wiped clean like he was erasing the evidence. But the memory stuck. Sometimes, when I scroll through Hinge and stumble on a face with the faintest resemblance, a jawline, a smile, a flicker of gray in the hair, I feel that same sick twist in my stomach. A reminder that I was tangled up in something too close, too wrong, without even knowing it until the moment it stared me in the face, holding a coffee mug at 7 in the morning. I'll never forget that look. The shock in his eyes. The silence. The truth neither of us could speak. And the sick reality that I can't take any of it back. You ever sit on a date thinking this is going smoother than you expected, and then it takes such a hard left turn that you're still trying to figure out what actually happened weeks later? That's exactly what this felt like. We matched on Hinge after a couple of lazy swipes on a Tuesday night. She looked normal, cute in her photos, not over-filtered, just regular. Her profile had dumb prompts like, "Pineapple belongs on pizza," and "I'll fall for you if you bring me tacos," so I figured she wasn't trying too hard. We messaged back and forth. Nothing special. Just light stuff about work, uni, the usual. She suggested we grab coffee instead of drinks, which was fine by me. Safer, daytime, chill. We met at this quiet cafe tucked off a side street. Not busy, just a few people on laptops and some older couple by the window. She showed up in a denim jacket, hair tied up, looking exactly like her photos. That already put me at ease. No catfish, no weird age gap pretending. I thought, finally, a normal date. The first half was great. We ordered lattes, sat outside at one of those shaky metal tables, and she was easy to talk to. We went through the usual questions, jobs, siblings, travel stories. She laughed at the dumb stuff I said, leaned in when I talked, and kept eye contact. Everything in my head was ticking green boxes. I was already picturing maybe a second date, maybe dinner next time instead of coffee. Then, out of nowhere, she tilted her head and asked if I'd ever date someone older. At first, I thought she meant like a year or two. Everyone jokes about age gaps anyway, so I shrugged, waiting for her to clarify. But she leaned back in her chair, still smiling, and said she wasn't actually looking for herself. She was looking for someone for her mom. I sat there, frozen, like I misheard her. But she kept going, totally calm, sipping her latte like this was the most natural thing in the world. She explained her mom was divorced, lonely, and she thought it would be cute to set her up through Hinge. She said she thought I had the right vibe. Before I could even process, she waved toward the cafe door. And that's when her mom walked out. I swear, my brain couldn't catch up. This woman, her mom, came out wearing a floral blouse and carrying her own cup of coffee. She looked at least 60. Lines on her face, gray streaks in her hair, polite smile like she'd been listening the whole time. She sat down in the empty chair between us like this had been planned all along. I didn't know what to do. My hands went cold, my chest tight. The daughter just sat back, grinning like she'd pulled off the best surprise ever. Meanwhile, the mum started asking me questions straight away. Where I worked, if I lived nearby, what my intentions were. It felt less like a date and more like a job interview, except one I never applied for. I kept glancing at the daughter, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a joke. But she never did. She just let her mum talk, nodding along, occasionally chiming in about how perfect I was. The whole time I felt trapped at that stupid metal table while strangers walked by, sipping their coffees, totally unaware I was stuck in some twisted family setup. The worst part was how the mum looked at me. Not in a creepy way, just expectant. Like she genuinely thought this could turn into something. Like her daughter had prepped her that she'd finally found the right guy. Every time I tried to pull the conversation back to something casual, she'd redirect it to serious topics, long-term plans, marriage, settling down. My head was spinning. I couldn't even taste the coffee anymore. My throat felt dry, my hands restless under the table. I wanted to stand up and leave, but the way they boxed me in, it felt impossible. The mum leaning forward, the daughter smiling like she was proud. Finally, I mumbled something about having to go soon, some fake excuse about work. The mum looked disappointed, like I'd just failed a test. The daughter didn't stop smiling, though. She just leaned in and said something about how we should all do dinner next time. I walked away from that cafe so fast I nearly spilled what was left of my drink. My brain was buzzing with every red flag I'd ignored. The way she'd pushed for coffee instead of drinks. The way she asked about age gaps out of nowhere. The way her profile barely mentioned herself. Just vague prompts. I hadn't seen it then, but now it was obvious. On the walk home, my phone buzzed. A message from her saying her mum thought I was sweet. I deleted the thread without replying. Later that night, her profile was gone. Deleted, unmatched, wiped clean. But I still think about it sometimes. That cafe table, the mum's hopeful eyes, the daughter's satisfied grin, the way it all felt rehearsed, like I wasn't the first guy they'd pulled this on. Like they'd been doing this over and over, parading men in front of the mum, seeing who would take the bait. And I can't get the image out of my head of the mum sitting there, sipping her coffee, convinced her daughter had finally found her someone. I never went back to that cafe. You know how sometimes little details don't hit you until way later? Like something feels off in the moment, but your brain tells you to just laugh it off? That's exactly what happened the night I went back to his apartment. We'd been talking on Hinge for about 2 weeks. He seemed normal enough. Maybe too normal. Nothing flashy about his profile. Just some photos of him hiking, cooking, and one with a dog that I later found out wasn't even his. He suggested we hang out at his place after a bar, and honestly, I didn't think twice. The building was kind of plain, just a block of apartments with buzzers that didn't work properly. His actual unit was nicer than I expected. Not spotless, but not disgusting either. Minimal furniture, TV on a stand, some candles, the kind of place where you can tell a guy only decorated because he felt like he had to. But the one thing that stood out immediately was his bookshelf. At first glance, it looked normal. A couple rows of books, random framed photos, a plant. But then I noticed the bags. Not just one, a whole shelf stacked with purses. Different sizes, different colors. Some looked brand new, some looked worn out. I laughed, pointed at it, and made some dumb joke about him being into fashion. He laughed too, said something vague, and quickly changed the subject. I brushed it off, assuming maybe they were gifts for his sister or leftovers from an ex. I didn't want to seem nosy, so I let it go. Later, while he was in the kitchen grabbing drinks, I wandered over to the shelf again. That's when my stomach dropped. There, in the middle of the row, was a purse that looked exactly like mine. Same brand, same color, even the same little tassel charm on the zipper. My heart started beating harder, but I told myself no, it couldn't be. Loads of people own the same bag. Then I leaned in closer. On the inside flap, scratched faintly into the leather, were my initials, or what used to be my initials. They had been carved over with some jagged lines, almost like he tried to erase them. It was my bag, except my bag was hanging on the chair back at my apartment. I'd bought it years ago, saved up for it, and even had it customized with those initials. This was the exact same one, except ruined. Suddenly, the bookshelf didn't look random anymore. Every purse on that shelf was different, unique in its own way. A bright red clutch, a black tote with a broken strap, a sequined mini bag. None of them matched. None of them fit with his otherwise boring apartment. It looked less like storage and more like a collection, a display. My throat went dry. I kept staring at my scratched-out initials until I heard him coming back down the hall. I quickly stepped away, pretending to look at a book, acting like nothing was wrong. But my brain wouldn't stop racing. Why would he have that? Why would he keep it? And if this one was mine, how many of those others belonged to girls who'd sat on this same couch before me? I sat there, sipping the drink he handed me, trying to act normal. He smiled, talked casually, like everything was fine, but all I could think about was that shelf, the way the purses were lined up like trophies, how carefully they were arranged, almost proud. My eyes kept darting back to it. I noticed details I hadn't before. A lipstick stain on one, a ripped strap held together with a safety pin. One still had a keychain dangling from it, a little plush bear. They weren't just random bags, they were souvenirs. Souvenirs from dates, from other girls, from me. I suddenly felt sick. My palms were sweating, my chest tight. I forced myself to keep smiling, nodding at whatever he was saying. Inside, I was screaming at myself to find an excuse, to leave, to get out of that apartment without tipping him off. The longer I sat there, the more the air felt heavy. Like those purses weren't just objects, but silent reminders of all the others who'd been here before me. I wondered if they had laughed like I did, brushed it off, and then noticed their own bag. Eventually I faked a yawn, said I had to get up early. He didn't argue. He walked me to the door, kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. My hands were shaking the whole walk home. When I got back, I checked my own purse. Same model, same brand, same color, except mine still had my initials intact. The one at his place looked like a twisted mirror version, as if he'd deliberately defaced it. I couldn't stop picturing that shelf. Row after row of purses, all carrying tiny pieces of other women's lives. Scratched out, ripped, stained, but kept, displayed, like proof, like warnings. I unmatched him the second I got inside, deleted the messages, blocked his number. But even after that, I couldn't shake it. Every time I open my own bag now, I think of that other one sitting on his shelf with my ruined initials carved into it, proof that I was just another souvenir in his collection. And I'll never know how many more there were. It started out normal, which is the worst part. Like there was nothing in the beginning that made me think I'd end up where I did. She matched me on Hinge, profile full of soft aesthetic shots, her with teacups, books, gardens. She kept mentioning tea in her prompts too, something like, "My love language is Earl Grey," and "My ideal first date is a tea house." I figured it was just a quirky theme she leaned into. When we started talking, she was nice. Polite, lots of emojis, didn't seem pushy. The only thing she was weirdly firm about was the first date location. She didn't want a bar, didn't want a restaurant, not even a coffee shop. She said it had to be this tea house downtown that she loved. She kept calling it my place, like it was special to her. I didn't care. I thought maybe it was just her thing. So I showed up. The tea house was tucked into a back street, kind of hidden behind a bakery. It looked old, not in a cozy way, but in a forgotten way. The sign was peeling, the windows were fogged over, and when I walked in, the air was heavy with this mix of herbs and dust. She was already there, sitting at a table near the back, waving me over. She ordered everything. Didn't even ask what I liked. Just told the woman behind the counter to bring out a pot of something I'd never heard of. When it came, the smell was strong, not bad, just unfamiliar, like flowers and medicine mixed together. I tried to be polite and drank it. It tasted bitter, but she kept insisting I'd get used to it. At first it was fine. We talked, laughed, even joked about how pretentious tea culture could be. But after about an hour, I started feeling heavy. Not just tired like my arms weighed double and my head was stuffed with cotton. I thought maybe it was just the weird tea making me drowsy. She noticed me rubbing my eyes and smiled, like she'd been waiting for it. By the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late. My vision blurred, the room tilted, and the last thing I remember clearly was her reaching across the table to touch my hand. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't in the tea house anymore. I was in a bathroom, a bathtub specifically. The water was ice cold, so cold it felt like knives against my skin. My chest jolted and I gasped, trying to sit up, but every movement sent pain stabbing through my side. That's when I saw it, a stitched scar running along my ribs, fresh, jagged. My body shook so hard I almost slipped under the water again. The bathroom was dim, one single bulb above the sink. The tiles were old and cracked. My clothes were gone, replaced by some rough towel draped over me. On the counter, my phone was propped up against a glass. The screen was on, Hinge open. One message at the top. From her. Hope the date was worth it. I stared at the words, my mind blank. My side throbbed. The scar looked sloppy, like it had been done in a rush. I didn't know if something had been taken out of me or put into me. My stomach churned and I gagged, but nothing came up. I tried to stand, but my legs barely worked. I gripped the edge of the tub, slipping against the freezing water, dragging myself out, inch by inch. The floor was wet under my feet, stained in places I didn't want to think about. My phone buzzed once, then went dark, like the battery had died. I looked around the room. There were no windows, just that single door. Beside the sink, stacked neatly, were a few other phones. Different cases, different sizes. Some cracked, some still lit up faintly. All dead, quiet. Next to them, a small pile of wallets. That's when the panic really hit. I wasn't the first one here. I grabbed my phone, even though it was dead, and stumbled to the door. It wasn't locked. I yanked it open and stepped into a narrow hallway. The air smelled like bleach and mold. There were no sounds except the dripping of a pipe somewhere above. I kept walking, half bent from the pain, one hand pressed against my stitched side. The hallway ended in a staircase. I climbed, each step echoing like it would give me away, though I didn't know to who. At the top, I found another door. I pushed it open and nearly collapsed into the night air. I was in some back alley, trash bags stacked high, neon light from a bar sign glowing down the street. I staggered forward, barefoot, shaking, holding onto the wall until I hit the main road. People stared but didn't stop. Maybe I looked drunk. Maybe they didn't care. Somehow, I made it to a 24-hour shop. Collapsed just inside the doorway. Someone called an ambulance. At the hospital, they told me the scar was real. Someone had cut into me. They said nothing seemed missing, but the stitches were sloppy and dangerous. If I hadn't woken up when I did, the cold water could have stopped my heart. They asked me what happened, and all I could say was, "Tea house." I never saw her again. Her profile vanished. The tea house? I went back weeks later, trying to prove to myself it was real. The spot was boarded up. No sign, no tables, no trace it had ever been open. Just an empty shell between two shops. But the scar is still there. Every time I see it in the mirror, I think of her face across that table, smiling as I started to fade, like she knew exactly where I'd end up. And the message on my phone. Hope the date was worth it. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched, but you don't want to admit it because you'll sound paranoid? That was me on this date. Except, instead of brushing it off as nerves, I kept telling myself it was just part of the photographer vibe he wouldn't shut up about. We matched on Hinge after he commented on one of my pictures. His profile was a whole aesthetic, moody shots of sunsets bleeding into city skylines, portraits of strangers on the street, alleys lit by neon. His prompts were dramatic little one-liners. I document life as it is, and moments fade, but photos last forever. At first, I thought he was just another artsy guy with a camera, the type who writes captions longer than the post itself. A little pretentious, sure, but harmless. At least he wasn't one of those guys flexing in gym mirrors or posing with a rented car. When we set up a coffee date, he told me he'd bring his tools. I thought he meant conversation starters or some joke about card tricks. Nope. He meant his camera, not a casual point and shoot, not just his phone. A full DSLR setup in a padded bag that he carried like it was an extension of his body. From the very start, the camera was there. I spotted him waiting outside the cafe, leaning against the brick wall with the strap already slung around his neck. Before I even reached him, he snapped a shot of me walking up. The shutter clicked sharp and loud in the cold morning air. He grinned like we were in on the same joke. "Candid date photography," he said, like it was a brand. I laughed, because I didn't want to look uptight, but something in my stomach twisted. I told myself to relax. People take pictures, right? Everyone posts their life online. Maybe this was just his thing. The first 20 minutes were fine. We ordered lattes, sat by the window, did the small talk routine. He asked about my job, my family, my favorite movies. But every few minutes, he'd interrupt the flow of conversation to lift his camera. Click. I'd be mid-sip, steam fogging my glasses, and there it was again. Click. I'd glance at my phone, and the lens would shift, capturing the top of my head, the slope of my shoulders. Click. At first, I joked. "Wow, am I your model now?" I said with a half smile, waiting for him to laugh and put the camera away. But he just grinned, eyes hidden behind the viewfinder, and said, "You've got the look." The look for what? He didn't say. The longer it went on, the less funny it felt. He wasn't just taking casual pictures. He was framing me, tilting the lens down toward my hands when I fiddled with my sleeve, zooming in on my shoes when I crossed my legs. He crouched low at one point, like a paparazzo catching me off guard. I felt like prey. I could see my own reflection in the window-stiff posture, eyes darting toward the camera, lips pressed thin. Not the relaxed, flirty version of myself I wanted to be on a first date. Just trapped, documented. By the end, I was drained. Every muscle in my body felt coiled tight. When he offered to walk me home, I made up a flimsy excuse about having errands and forced a polite smile. He looked disappointed, but not surprised. I left, practically sprinting down the block, telling myself it was just his weird obsession, something I'd laugh about later with friends. But I didn't laugh. A week later, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. No text, just a link. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't Instagram. It wasn't a blog. It was a forum. Dark-colored background, messy threads, usernames that sounded like codes. At the top of the thread was his name, not his real one, but his handle, which I recognized instantly. Dozens of photos filled the page. Women, all different. Cafes, bars, parks. Shots of them, mid-bite, mid-laugh, mid-sip. Photos that looked innocent, even beautiful, until I read the captions. Girl who pretends she's into you. Girl who will break your heart. Girl who doesn't know she's being watched. Each one labeled like some twisted stock image. And then I saw mine. Girl who thinks she's safe. My face stared back at me. Hair tucked behind my ear. Sunlight through the cafe window catching the curve of my cheek. Another shot of me sipping coffee. One adjusting my sleeve. Another staring off into the street like I was lost in thought. All moments I hadn't thought twice about. All moments stolen and repackaged. My hands shook as I scrolled. There were at least 10 of me, maybe more. The comments were worse than the photos. Strangers analyzing me like I was a character. She looks naive. Bet she ghosted him. That outfit screams daddy issues. Some asked for my Instagram. Some wanted more pictures. One comment just said, I want her next. I felt sick. My skin crawled as if the lens was still pointed at me, still clicking, still documenting. My friend called me while I stared at the thread, her voice shaky. She said she recognized other girls too. Faces from our city, people she'd seen around. Different clothes, different settings, all taken on dates. He hadn't been dating at all. He'd been curating, collecting, using Hinge as his hunting ground. I tried reporting it, but this wasn't like flagging an Instagram account. This was buried deeper, on forums where rules were looser and moderation was a joke. Even if the thread went down, the photos were already out there, saved, downloaded, circulating. For days after, I avoided leaving the house. When I finally did, I found myself scanning every crowd, convinced a lens was pointed at me. I even stopped going to my favorite cafe. The thought of sitting by the window, sipping a drink, felt dangerous now, like handing myself over to another caption. But what haunts me most isn't the thread itself. It's the memory of his smile that day, the calm, steady grin every time the shutter clicked. Like he already knew where those photos were going. Like he wasn't on a date at all, he was feeding content to his audience in real time. And that caption, girl who thinks she's safe. It loops in my head every night when I lie awake. Because I used to think safety was simple. Don't walk alone at night. Don't leave your drink unattended. Drop your location to a friend. I never thought I had to protect myself from something as ordinary as a camera on a date. Now, I can't shake the feeling that I'll never really be safe again. I should have trusted my gut when she pushed so hard for us to meet at this specific club. I hate clubs. Too loud, too crowded, too sweaty. But she kept saying it was her favorite spot, that the vibe there was different, and if I wanted to really get to know her, that's where it had to be. She sounded so certain about it that I gave in, even though I'd been hoping for a quieter night, a bar, a coffee shop, something where we could actually talk. But she insisted, almost like it was a test. The place was one of those velvet rope clubs where the line outside was half the attraction. Guys in expensive sneakers, women in glittery dresses, bouncers built like refrigerators scanning IDs with dead eyes. When I finally got past the door, it hit me like stepping into a hurricane. Bass pounded so hard it rattled my chest cavity. Lights strobed in violent bursts of red, blue, and green until the room barely looked real. People were packed shoulder to shoulder, grinding, shouting, spilling drinks. The air was thick with sweat and perfume, sticky with alcohol. I was already annoyed. This wasn't me. I hated how the noise swallowed my thoughts. I hated how every surface was damp, like the whole place was coated in condensation. I was ready to cut my losses. Maybe text her that I couldn't make it when I saw her. Red dress, loose hair catching the lights, a cocktail in her hand like it belonged there. She looked calm in the chaos, glowing in a way that drew me in. She smiled when she saw me, raised her hand in a wave. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misjudged everything. Maybe this night would be worth it. I pushed through the crowd, weaving between sweaty bodies, my eyes locked on her, and then I froze, because I saw her again. Same red dress, same loose hair, same glass in her hand, standing just a few feet away from the first one. I blinked hard, disoriented by the lights, thinking maybe it was a reflection. Clubs are full of mirrors, right? But the angle was wrong. This wasn't glass. This was two people, both her, both looking right at me. My brain stuttered, short-circuiting. My mouth went dry. The first one smiled. Then the second one smiled. Same timing, same expression. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I'd been drinking too fast, except I hadn't even touched alcohol yet. I was stone sober, and there were two of her. I stood frozen while they both started moving toward me, weaving through the crowd like twin sharks zeroing in on prey. They laughed as they approached, sharp, identical laughs that sliced through the music in my head, even if no one else seemed to notice. One came up on my left, the other on my right. The smell of their perfume hit me at the same time, identical notes of vanilla and smoke. Their arms brushed mine as they leaned in close, so close I could feel the warmth radiating off their skin. I stared, trying to find some difference, anything to latch onto, a detail, a flaw, but they were exact copies, down to the chipped black nail polish, the small scar just under their wrist, the beauty mark near their lip. Even their necklaces caught the light at the same angle, swinging in sync. I opened my mouth to speak, but the music swallowed my words. They didn't say anything at first. They just smiled with those same lips, tilting their heads in perfect unison. Finally, one leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "Pick one of us," she whispered. "Only one's real." The hairs on my neck rose. My stomach knotted so tight I thought I might throw up. I jerked back, eyes darting between them, looking for anything that would break the illusion. But they both blinked at the exact same time, tilted their heads at the same angle, smiled with the same too-wide grin. It was like staring at two mirrors, but there was no glass, no reflection, just them. The longer I looked, the less human they seemed. Not because of how they moved, but because of how perfectly they moved. No lag, no hesitation, just duplication. Panic surged through me. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I shoved into the crowd, stumbling, trying to lose them in the chaos. But every time I glanced back, they were there, moving slower than me, calmer than me, never rushing, just following, in sync. I pushed toward the exit, desperate for air, for silence, for reality. The bouncer's massive hand shot out, blocking my path. He didn't say anything, just looked down at me with dead, heavy eyes and shook his head like leaving wasn't an option. I turned back, my pulse thundering. And there they were, side by side now, framed by strobing lights, both of them staring at me with identical predator smiles. Everything after that blurs. I don't remember pushing past the bouncer. I don't remember clawing through the crowd. One moment I was trapped, and the next I was stumbling down the street outside, lungs burning, cold air slicing my face. My ears still rang with the bass. My skin still tingled where their arms had brushed mine. I don't remember running, but when I looked back, I swear I saw them in the doorway. Both of them, watching, waiting. When I got home, I deleted Hinge instantly. I couldn't risk seeing her face again, not after that. But curiosity's a poison. The next day, against all logic, I re-downloaded the app. I searched for her profile, desperate for some explanation. A twin sister prank, a glitch, something. But her profile was gone, vanished, like she'd never existed. No red dress, no laugh, no name. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that it was just some cruel trick, or a trick of the lights, or my brain messing with me. But sometimes, late at night, walking past glass windows lit by neon, I catch my reflection. And for a split second, I swear there's another version of me walking beside it. Same clothes, same posture, same expression. And every time, I hear her voice in my head. Pick one of us. Only one's real. And I can't shake the feeling that one day, I'll choose wrong.